IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
I'm Aditya Pareek, and you're listening to All Things Policy. Recently, the story broke that the government of Maldives is drafting a bill that will prohibit all actions that could affect its relationship with foreign countries. This development has occurred in the backdrop of a growing India Out campaign in the country, especially after the release of former President Abdulla Yameen. The movement has grown considerably. What is China's role in it? How is it going to impact Maldives' relationship with India and its own democratic stability? To discuss the India Out campaign and broader India Maldives relations, I have with me our in house expert on the matter and my friend, Dr. Shrey Khanna. Welcome, Shrey.
Thank you, Aditya.
So, Shrey, let's start with the very meat of the matter. For the benefit of our audience, just what is this India Out campaign about in Maldives?
Okay, so this campaign called India Out campaign, it started on social media platforms in early 2020. There were hashtags pushing through this campaign, but it was relatively a low-key movement till last year around June, and it reached at that time at such proportions that in June, Indian High Commission wrote to countries, Maldives Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and sought direct action against recurring articles and social media posts that were attacking the dignity of the High Commission. And then soon after that, Maldivian Democratic Party, which is the ruling party in Maldives, it released an official statement that expressed quote unquote concern over the ill-founded and disparaging remarks against Indian diplomats. And interestingly, it specifically named a local news publication called Dhiaris and its co-founder Ahmad Azan, whom the MDP, Maldivian Democratic Party, it accused of well-funded, well-orchestrated and a pre-made political campaign with the express purpose of whipping up hatred against the Maldives' closest ally, India. So if you follow this guy and the publication, it constantly pushes anti-India content on Twitter and saying things like that India is anti-Muslim or Maldives will soon be annexed like Sikkim. So he was continuously, ramping up this anti-India propaganda. And after this High Commissioner letter was leaked in the media, the same Adri Harris, it then accused India of meddling in domestic affairs of Maldives. And it became a big news because of all this highlighting in media. A guy was found with a bomb near the Indian embassy in Maldives, and following which the security of embassy was increased. Also, China's embassy is there, so its security was also increased. Now, this anti-India sentiment is actually the continuation of what started under former President Abdullah Yameen, who had taken a explicit pro-China and anti-India line. In fact, when he had imposed the emergency in 2018, just before his impeachment, and India was at that time, reported to be looking at the options what India can do. If you remember Operation Cactus in 80s. So, and their own former president like Nasheed, he was asking India to intervene. And then Chinese media, these articles started coming in that, warned against Indian intervention. There was an article in Global Times which warned to this effect. And then China kind of came at his defense. There were, 11 planned warships, fleet of destroyers, frigate. They sailed into the Eastern Indian Ocean and they stayed there for a month. So China was showing great deal of support for Yamin when he had imposed emergency in 2018. Now, one of the issue at that time was the time for anti-India rhetoric was there was a gift of two Dhruv advanced light helicopters for search and rescue operations in Maldives and nearby waters. And as Indian officers were sent to train their Maldivian counterparts, many in Progressive Party of Maldives, which is Yamin's party, said that India was creating its military presence. And at that time, there was a source of that. This was a source of anti-India rhetoric. And then he had asked government of India to take these helicopters back, and he had refused to extend the stay of Indian officer. Now, why this is important is that because this India Out campaign, it was there, but it was only on social media and it was largely leaderless. So in November 2021, Abdullah Yameen, he was released by the Supreme Court in on corruption charges. And just before his release, if you follow because I followed that movement, the movement had started gathering steam on social media. Its footprint was rising, so much so that Maldivian government had to, issue a statement against that these views are not the sentiment of general public. This is a small group of individuals who have this agenda of tarnishing countries' long-standing ties with India. And what has happened now that after Maldivian Supreme Court it released Yami, then after his release, he has taken charge of the movement. Now that movement is being led by Yamin. And so what was essentially a social media movement, now it has been transformed by Yamin and PPM, his political party, as a grassroots movement. He's trying to do that. And soon after his release, he said that he will in the country, he will, tour around in the country and step up the ongoing campaign against Indian boots on the ground. He used that phrase. And then there were pictures on social media with Yamin in a red T-shirt with bold India Out printed and with his supporters campaigning. So he has kind of taken a charge of this movement, which has made this movement quite big. After that, Maldivian government again issued a statement, and the result of this we can see on ground is that Indians who are employed in Maldives, who work there as teachers in hotels, they are being harassed in public with these India Out campaign. And the many more than one incidents have been in the media, but at the same time, this PPM, Yamin's party, it has expressed kind of a disbelief over these incidents and said that, government is creating these sort of incidents just to, create conditions or to bring more Indian military personnel in Maldives. So that is where things stand right now.
Interesting. So it's sort of a information warfare operation against India by vested powers that be that are trying to upend the peace in that country.
Right.
So moving on, Shrey, the India-Maldives relationship is currently going on well. What has caused it? Because you mentioned about Yameen stirring up trouble, and when he was in power, there were significant frictions between the two countries. So what has caused this change?
So in 2018, there was a change in government, and Ibrahim Soli, he came to power. And after coming to power, he promulgated this India First policy. He also extended the stay of Indian personnel and choppers in Maldives, while cancelling China's Indian Ocean Observatory project, which was granted by President Yamin. And former President Nasheed, who is now a Speaker of Maldivian Parliament, he and Ibrahim Soli, they are on the same term with regard to the fact that India is in close proximity to Maldives, and it makes sense to prioritize its relationship with New Delhi. Now, but with this, and as a result of this relationship, it has gotten better. The president, he wishes the prime minister. Even recently, he expressed his condolences after the demise of Lata Mangeshkar. And there was this same group which pushes out anti-India rhetoric. It said that you don't speak anything about our domestic politics, but you are such a slave of India that you have to talk about India every time. And with this, the betterment in India Maldives relationship, this issue of sovereignty has come up because solely government it has prioritized the relationship with India. So there is one another source of contention right now. There is one UTF harbor project which has been given to India, where India has to develop and maintain a coast guard harbor and dockyard at UTF. It's a strategically located atoll near the capital Male. And there were some leaked documents that were cited by the same DRS newspaper that said that India is actually planning a naval base and would stay there for decades with exclusive right. After this, their chief of defense forces, he had to come and said that while Indian government had indicated that it would provide grant assistance, there are no plans of Indian naval bases in the country. And one interesting thing is that with Yamin's leadership of the campaign, it has unified the ruling coalition. For example, former President Nasheed, who he has said India is the single most important country for Maldives. Even, someone like President Gayoom, who is half brother of Yamin, he has said that no one should campaign against any neighboring country, be it India, Pakistan, or Egypt. And because Yamin was dictatorial, he's not quite popular in the democratic elite. And many members of different political parties have categorically stated that India-Maldives relationship is for betterment of the country. So the movement is going on, and it is in this response. It's in the response to this movement that the government is planning a draft bill which will penalize the domestic criticism of the foreign countries. But in my opinion, it is more likely to backfire as it would unite the supporters of free press, democracy in Maldives against the government. And though Yamin is particularly known as a dictator, but this if this bill becomes an act, it will unite all opposition against the government as well as India. So I don't think it's a good decision to have such kind of law. There has to be some other way how this criticism has to be, neutralized.
Interesting. So there are actually two opposing sides to this conflict inside Maldives in the information sphere as well as in the legislative sphere as well as the public opinion sphere. So I think the external actors vis-a-vis China and India, much of the situation might depend on them. So that leads me to my next question. The elections are scheduled in Maldives in 2023. So I wanted to ask whether a Yamin victory next year would harm Maldives' ties with India.
Well, it's too soon to say whether Yamin will get his victory, because even if India Out campaign is rising, but it is still very limited. And going by what happened last time when Yamin was in power, there was so much ruckus. He had imposed emergency and house arrested Supreme Court judges. So there is very the pro-democratic section of Maldivian society. They are against Yamin and his plans. But with this, if a repeat of what happened in, for example, 2013, when there was a similar anti-India campaign when President Nasheed was in power, and channelizing that anger, Yamin came to power. And if this time the same thing happens, then yes, there can be a setback to India-Maldives relations. But at the same time, and we have Sri Lanka's example in front of us, that even if one of the political parties in these countries it campaign against India, after they come to power, they have to mellow down their rhetoric, and because they have to work with India is not going anywhere. They are not going anywhere east. They will remain where they are. So, and it's a small country, so the anti-India rhetoric, it will come down even if Yamin comes to power. But what will happen is that the projects that China is eyeing for, like the Indian Ocean Observatory or the larger strategic projects that they are eyeing for, they in that zone there will be progress if Yamin comes to power.
Interesting. And on that note, folks, we'll take a small break. Don't go anywhere.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun speaks with Anish Basteen, co-founder of Swami Drinks. They discuss the company's genesis and what it's like building a non-traditional premium product like tonic in the Indian market. This week on Cock and Bull, Cyrus Antriksha and I talk about Spotify's issues with Neil Young and other artists in wake of the controversy with Joe Rogan. On The Wire Talks, Siddharth talks to journalist and author Amitav Kumar about his novel on fake news, A Time Outside This Time. The Pulyabazi hosts discuss what the government spends on the most in their series Ek Sawal Kahin Jawab. And on Smarter with Sid, Siddharth introduces us to the Pomodoro time management technique. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also, please do tell a friend. It really does help us when you spread the word about our podcast. And I'd also like to ask you if you could rate or recommend wherever you listen to our podcast. And speaking of where you listen to this show, if you're on an Android phone, do check out our new Android app. We have a brand new app with a brand new listening experience. Definitely check it out. I think you will enjoy it. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and CoinSwitch Kuber. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back, folks. We're discussing India-Maldives relations with Shrey. So, Shrey, for my final question, so since we left off on China's influence, as you know, last month, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Maldives as part of his Indian Ocean tour. What was the outcome of that trip and what kind of a success China achieved in Maldives with that?
Well, Wang Yi's visit, it coincided with the 50th anniversary of the establishment of China-Maldives diplomatic relationship. And there were in total 5 agreements that were signed between China and Maldives during his visit. One was agreement on mutual visa exemption that will come into effect after pandemic restrictions have been lifted. It grants 30-day visa-free basis rule to Maldivians if they wish to travel to China. There is an economic and technical cooperation agreement on aid, which gives $63 million in aid to Maldives, and there is another some minor projects, for example, desalination plant and ophthalmic center. So, what has happened with Maldives China relationship is that after Soli came to power, he has preferred or prioritized India assisted projects for developing, infrastructure in the country. And he has also refused to implement the free trade agreement that was signed between the two countries in 2017. So, but nevertheless, he has not totally shunned China. He has announced its policy that we want to maintain friendship with all countries. We are a smaller country. We do not want enmity of any one country. And he has expressed the country's desire to maintain friendly relations with China. It has welcomed China specifically for small scale projects. So China is still invested in the country, but if we come to this India out protest, back onto it, like what you said, information warfare is a huge suspect, and we don't have proof for it right now. But going by what they are trying to do among and by they I mean obviously the Chinese, they are trying to do among the Sri Lankan Tamils right now, trying to instigate or they are trying to take advantage of problems with India and how we have seen Indian newspapers serving the Chinese propaganda items, then it would be no surprise that China is providing fuel for it, because this is a kind of a well orchestrated campaign that is going on there. But we have no proof of it right now, and it will, fit into what they call the public opinion warfare as well. And interesting thing is, if you notice these anti-India accounts who push this India out campaign, they never take anti-China position. In fact, they always showcase China in a positive light. So there may be something going on. In fact, there was a picture of a Chinese embassy event in which there were people who were, with India out slogans in that red T-shirt with India out slogan. So there have been pictures like that. At least one event it came to knowledge, and so there is that as well. But all will depend on, as far as India Maldives and China Maldives relationship as well, that how the government is planning ahead with new draft bill, because if there is opposition to this bill and the opposition is united against the government, including from the liberal and pro democracy civil society, then obviously that will become a problem for the government. And obviously, till next year elections, these tensions, they are going to continue. Only after that elections we can, reach another level of this India-China rivalry in Maldives.
Interesting, Shrey. So, the way you describe it, to the situation in Maldives seems, like it has parallels with Iran when the Shah was deposed back during the Cold War. So, it really is an interesting parallel to see how different shades of opposition to the government might be united by this draft bill that's in the works, and that you say might backfire and aggravate the situation for the worse for India's national interests.
Yeah,
So,
but
yeah.
I would say
Mhm.
one thing that, Ibrahim Soli, who is the president right now, he is not as tyrannical as Shah. In fact, if someone is tyrannical who has, recorded history of being tyrannical, is the party which is opposing Ibrahim Soli, President Yameen. So there is that difference. But yeah, there is that
Absolutely.
parallel.
And absolutely. And it's about the same parallel with how the Islamists, later hijacked the revolution in Iran
Hmm.
and are
Right.
still in power.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
these Islamists, they are behind Yamin as well. So they are backing him like anything. So these newspapers and the groups that are helping Yamin, most of them have Islamist agenda as opposed to the secular orientation of the Soli government. So that angle is there, very much there.
Interesting. On that note, folks, we'll call it a wrap. If you like today's discussion, please do check out all past and future episodes of All Things Policy.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
You're the people pleaser, right? Or then desperately seeking the one? Oh wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. Oh no. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.
Inflation, fiscal deficit, GDP, MSP, NPA, equity market वगैरह वगैरह। दोस्तों, हमने सारे शब्द टीवी या अखबार में जरूर देखे होंगे या फिर सुने होंगे, पर हम में से कितने लोग हैं जो ये जानते हैं कि इन सब का सीधा प्रभाव पड़ता है हमारी सैलरी पर, हमारे इंक्रीमेंट पर और कमबख्त हमारे खर्चों पर। दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है अभिनव त्रिवेदी और मैं बात कर रहा हूँ इक्का दुक्का इकोनॉमी पॉडकास्ट से, जहाँ पे इस तरह के इकोनॉमिक और फाइनेंशियल टर्म्स को मैं जोड़ूंगा सीधा आपकी जेब से। हर मंगलवार एक नया एपिसोड सुने IVM पॉडकास्ट की वेबसाइट, ऐप या फिर किसी भी अन्य पॉडकास्ट प्लेटफॉर्म पर।